Good morning to everyone. Welcome to the Jindal School of Languages and Literature's first pre-semester engagement program. This will be an important session to be followed by others later this summer before you actually join. In other words, before you actually begin your classes in August, we'll have a couple more sessions and the university will be also conducting several orientation introduction sessions for students of various programs, but this is a program-specific pre-semester engagement program for the students of the BA Honors English program. So I'm glad you can be here today. This is being recorded for those who are not present today. The purpose of this program is fairly simple, which is to tell you a little bit about not so much the specifics of your program, although we will give some information about that, excuse me, but rather to give you an overview of the program and its objectives, and to explain some of the basic terminology that we use to describe different elements of the program, in particular courses, for instance, core or compulsory courses, elective courses, cross-electives, internship, that sort of thing. So we'll be introducing you to certain vocabulary which should be useful for you in going through this program and being a student of this university. So you got an email invitation which gave a little agenda of the program. So following that, we'll have a section of about 20 minutes here where I'm telling you a little bit about some of the purposes behind the program and some of the reasons why we believe it's good and useful for people to study English language and literature as well as other languages and literature in a formal way in a university setting. And then, as I said, we'll give some more specific information about elements of the program towards the end, and we will leave time for questions that you students might have at the end of the program. And very importantly, we want to give the faculty of the school an opportunity to introduce themselves and to tell you a little bit about, shall we say, what makes them tick. What are they in this for as students and scholars of English language and literature. I want to begin by so my name is Dennis Layton. I'm the dean, presently the dean of the Jindal School of Languages and Literatures. I'm actually trained as a historian, but a lot of the work I do as a historian is from, well, shall we say, not only archival or unpublished sources, but from published materials also. And I will always felt very much a part of the broader field of English studies and cultural studies, in part because my main interests as a historian have to do with modern Britain, particularly 19th and early 20th century Britain, which happens to be the terrain or the place from which a lot of literature that English literature students study comes. So you might say I'm in English studies, but primarily as a historian rather than as a literary scholar. But I want to begin by saying something about what it means to be a literary scholar and what it means to be a critic. So I'll be talking about critics and criticism, and although I will keep it fairly brief, I may refer to some terms, some words that you may already be familiar with, and also some particular authorities, writers, authors who've had interesting and useful things to say about the activity of criticism and the kind of the role of the critic. So we're all critics, aren't we, right? We're all engaging in criticism in one way or another in most of our waking hours, okay? And I'm recalling some of the interviews I had with some of you who are here in this program, some of the students, where we asked you, what do you find interesting about literature or language or writing? More specifically, why are you interested in this program? And many of you pointed out that you are writers. And well, praising you for that and encouraging you, we also took the opportunity to point out that people who are themselves creative artists, producers of new things, new words, new ideas, also have to be effective critics and analysts also. And we also told some of you that the bulk of this program, or certainly the center of this program, will be about learning useful tools of criticism and analysis. And when people ask you, and when I say people, I mean it could be your parents, it could be your little brother, it could be your peers, it could be your uncle, could be all kinds of people who maybe learn that you're enrolled in a program called BA Honors English and wonder, well, what's that good for? You know, it's not like BComs or data analytics or something like that. Why the implicit criticism is, why would you choose to do something as useless as English? And I assure you that nothing is more useful than studying English language and literature and becoming adept in the tools of criticism and analysis. Okay, I'm reminded of a famous saying by a poet and philosopher in Germany in the early Romantic period named Novalis, who, although here he was talking about philosophy rather than literature or humanities, what he has to say about philosophy, I think, holds equally well for language and literature studies. Novalis said, philosophy may bake no bread, but it may procure for us God, freedom, and immortality. Which then is more practical, economy or philosophy? Which then is more practical, economy or philosophy? Okay. Now, you might say that this is an obscure German thinker of the age of Romanticism who is trying to kind of operating with a climate of thought and intellectual climate in which a lot of practical things were being done, and the emergence of what we call social sciences, particularly a new science called economics or political economy. And a lot of serious people were wondering, well, what's the point in studying fairly traditional things like grammar or logic or rhetoric, subjects or areas of knowledge that had been central to formal curricula in Europe, or call it the Western world, Western civilization, since antiquity. And Novalis was obviously trying to assert or reassert the importance of quote unquote useless areas of knowledge like philosophy, humanistic studies, literature, and so on. Okay, a lot of creative writers and creative practitioners themselves have been critics also, and they have written and spoken eloquently about the need to see creative activity and critical activity together and understand that each serves the other, and they're not strictly speaking separate activities. Of course, we know a poet or a painter or a sculptor or a dancer may not be particularly interested in writing about or examining or analyzing the work of others. They do what they do as artists. There are, you might say, to use a less polite term, self-centered in that way. But lots of practitioners and theorists of criticism over the ages, not only in Germany or in the Western world, but in China, in India, and many other places going back several millennia, have talked about the importance of seeing practice and theory together, and have emphasized the need for creative practitioners to be aware of what other creative practitioners do, and even to be able to formulate, to kind of form and to understand particular principles or techniques of what is called criticism in order to do their art more effectively, Okay, so in some ways we may very much admire critics and philosophers as T.S. Eliot and Matthew Arnold about 100 or 150 years ago, not to mention several predecessors going back thousands of years, have asserted the importance of artists and creative practitioners understanding what might be called the principles of criticism. Okay, and the principles of criticism mean simply understanding the kind of often written and formal as well as informal ways in which people do art, and also the ways in which people understand or receive art. In other words, the audience, the audience that reads that poem or watches that play or views that film or whatever. Theorists of criticism have been very intently interested in how it is that audiences receive or understand a work of art. And this goes all the way back at least to Aristotle, almost 2,500 years ago, in his influential treatise called the Poetics, okay? Where among other things, Aristotle tried to make a distinction between poesis or poetry, or what we call the production of words, and exploration of ideas and sentiments through words. Among other things, Aristotle wanted to distinguish between poesis or poetics, the rules of poetry or principles of poetry, and things like historia, from which we get the word history, meaning an investigation or inquiry into the past. But Aristotle's Poetics was an attempt to give a kind of what would be called a typology, an identification of different types, we would say different types of literature, forms of art, and also to understand the functions and the effects that those works of art have on people. So that's all part of the work of criticism and the work of what's often formally called literary analysis or literary theory. And in this program, you'll be learning quite a lot about analysis and literary theory, and theories that are helpful not only for understanding, interpreting written texts, but understanding other cultural products such as films, dance, sculpture, performing arts, and that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm going to abbreviate my talk here and not go into definitions of terms from ancient Greek like analysis or criticism. Those are, of course, English words, but they come from Greek roots, and they're words which come into the English language about 400 or 500 years ago, and that itself is important, the way in which certain elements of ancient Greek thought and of understanding the world came into the intellectual world of people far beyond what was ancient Greece. But having said I wouldn't do that, there is one thing I insist on saying: analysis. Okay, analysis is a word which you, I'm sure, have an understanding of. And you know, it even at the beginning of this talk mentioned the term data analytics as one of those useful fields that people study in order to do something useful and profitable in life. But analysis comes from Greek words which mean literally to unloose or to unravel, to take apart, okay, as in like a thread or a piece of fabric. In other words, to look at something which is whole and try to understand how it's put together, understand its constitutive parts. That's what analysis is in the mind of someone like Aristotle almost 2,500 years ago. And that ancient Greek understanding of analysis is something that's important to us even today. Analysis as an activity, as something that can be done by economists, something that can be done by sociologists, by historians, by mathematicians, by physicists, by chemists, by engineers, as well as by people who study and appreciate languages and literature. I've written down a bunch of terms here from Sanskrit. I was going to say something about, you know, trying to suggest that this is not just an obscure ancient Greek activity. It's something that permeates the thinking of other parts of the world also. And there's certainly multiple terms in the Sanskrit language, at least 10 or 12, which are approximate to the Greek term analysis and approximate to the Greek term criticism. But whatever you would learn from that kind of exposition, if I were to do it, I think you would get the idea that analysis and criticism is something that many people around the world have been aware of and have practiced for many thousands of years. Criticism, of course, has to do with judging and discernment, to be able to discern, to make distinctions, to understand how one thing is different from another, or may be different from another, and how understanding those differences and similarities among things help us understand the world better, including the worlds that we encounter through the written word or the spoken word texts and poetry and so on. One early critic, or rather self-conscious critic, at least in the English language world, the Anglosphere, was a 17th century poet and writer named John Dryden. John Dryden, who in the late 1600s, in a preface to something he'd written about, actually a work of poetry, he said, "I must take leave to tell that they wholly mistake the nature of criticism, who think its business is principally to find fault. Criticism, as it was first instituted by Aristotle, was meant a standard of judging well, the chief part of which is to observe those excellencies which should delight a reasonable reader." Okay, so you may think, in an informal sense of the words criticism and critic means someone who criticizes, who slams you, who says, "That's bad, you're doing it wrong, start over." Okay, that may be part of criticism, and it may be the legitimate work of someone called a critic. But it's not just about finding fault, it's engaging in discernment and understanding differences and similarities in order to understand something better, including what we call a work of art, whether it's a painting or a sculpture or a film or a poem or a prose work or whatever. And therefore, as you go along in this program and you learn things about literary criticism and literary theory, you will come to understand that in the broadest sense, it simply means literary studies or the study of literature and all the things that we bring to bear in trying to understand and, yes, appreciate literature. Okay, so because I'm running out of time here and I want to leave time for other parts of the program, I would refer you to some eminent critics in the English-speaking world, people like Matthew Arnold in the middle 19th century, a famous essay called "The Function of Criticism at the Present Time," where he tried to say that, yes, poets should themselves also be critics, and it's also very useful if critics themselves are art practitioners, write poetry and plays themselves, and that there can be some mutual understanding not only between those groups of people, but that there could be advance or improvement and greater understanding in the world of literature if people who write poetry also engage in criticism of it or analysis of it, and if those who engage in analysis of poetry or prose or other art forms also engage in acts of creation themselves. Okay, and again, another prominent critic who has spoken and written very eloquently about that is a man named T.S. Eliot in essays like Tradition and the Individual Talent, or an essay written a couple years after that called The Function of Criticism. So you will be doing in this program courses which acquaint you very minutely with what we call tools or techniques of analysis or tools of criticism, not because we want you to use those tools to be a great fault finder, but to understand that even the most perhaps aggressive or unappreciated examples of finding fault are part of the process of understanding the world better. So again, you may be bamboozled or find yourself puzzled, maybe at the beginning of several courses you do about, what is she trying to tell us, or what is he trying to say about this particular theory of Derrida or Lacan or Michel Foucault or whoever. But it's all part of, it's a central activity to what people who engage in the study of language and literature do. And again, this isn't just an English thing, okay? Or it's not just a thing that English speakers do. I mentioned Aristotle more than 2,000 years ago. In the Indian tradition, we also have great philosophers of criticism, people like Rajasekhara, who's the author of a treatise, which in English translates into inquiry into literature, okay? Or Indian thinkers like Muni in the Natya Shastra, okay? So even, I would say, particularly in the Indian traditions, there have been lots of people engaged over many hundreds of years in what might be called, in more modern terms, the science of criticism. And also people in China, people in other parts of Europe, in the Arab or Islamic world. I won't bore you with names, but it's something that nearly all people who are engaged in the creative arts find themselves doing in a practical way, and also found reason to develop theories about in order to help them understand what they're doing better and to help them understand the work of others. So getting back to what studying language and literature is good for, it is about developing in you a certain capacity or sensibility or disposition that makes you better understand how literature and how the written word and the spoken word and also images work upon the human mind, and how it is that works of art teach people things about their lives. If that is not useful, I don't know what is. It is what we would call, what educationists often distinguish between professional programs and pre-professional programs. And BA Honors English is often described or categorized as a pre-professional program, but that does not mean that things you learn are useful or are rather useless. They are useful. And in fact, they are essential for practicing any profession successfully. And by any profession, I mean even the profession of being a spouse, a husband, a mother, a citizen, okay? These are all, in a sense, professions also. And criticism and critical engagement and understanding different techniques of analysis is something that we all need to do, learn how to do in order to function in the world, whether in kind of the micro community of our families and friends, or in the wider society, or indeed even within our professions. So I will now stop and allow you to absorb that for a moment. I will be teaching some courses in this program, although probably not very many or even any of the core or compulsory courses, but I will certainly be teaching courses that are called program electives and cross electives in various aspects of English studies. So whether you found what I have just said fascinating or amazing or boring or something in between, you'll have an opportunity to get to know me in the next several years as you go through this program. As I said at the beginning, part of this session will be about explaining to you the nitty-gritties about credits and program grade average and the structure of different kinds of activities. But before that, I would like to introduce my colleagues in the Jindal School of Language and Literature and invite them to say a little bit about themselves and what they do. So Dr. Kanupriya Dhingra, who is the most senior of them in the sense that she joined first. She was the first faculty member to join this program in the middle of last year. Also, Mr. Akshay Kale, who is assistant professor of Spanish and who, apart from teaching Spanish language and literature, will be teaching courses in translation and literary theory, which students in your program will also be able to register for. And then our newest faculty members, Dr. Angana Moitra and Dr. Tony Chakrabarti, who just joined us in the past month. I'm very happy to have an opportunity to introduce my colleagues here, and I invite them now to talk a little bit about what they do and why they do it. So if we could begin with Dr. Kanupriya and then hear from the others as well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dennis, and welcome everyone. I've met some of you online for interviews, and I'm excited to speak with you again, this time officially as students of this course. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Kanupriya Dhingra. I joined last year. I am a book historian by profession. I specialize in South Asian studies, Indian English poetry, urban studies, cultural studies, and so on. But what I want to talk about today, as you see on your screens, is what I do and why I do it. What brought me here in this classroom today to speak with prospective students for BA Honors English in Jindal Global University. So like most of you said, let's say in your interviews, the journey of studying literature and pursuing literature starts with a sense of comfort, right? So for years now, I've been trying to identify where this sense of comfort came from. Because I was enjoying reading Robert Frost, the poem that all of you have quoted at one point or the other. And I was trying to understand, okay, why is it fascinating for me that this is the road not taken and this is the road that could have been taken? Or, why Keats would say that this is a thing of beauty is joy forever, and why did that sublimity strike me? Or even when I was studying physics and studying the processes of how light is traveling and so on, what was it about this? What was about studying all of this that was intriguing me, So I realized, and I've come to this conclusion that I want to share with you, that it was the very act of engaging with thoughts, whether my own or somebody else's, that made this journey very, very fascinating for me. So because I got the opportunity or the space to be able to think and to be able to think how other people think is why I think my journey into English literature started. And I am where I am today, and starting on a newer journey of being able to teach this and share this. So I think, when I was pursuing my English honors in Delhi University, or my master's or my MPhil, I was intrigued by the processes of why someone is writing, where they are writing, how they are writing. In addition to how are we reading it, who is reading it, who's not allowed to read certain stuff, who's not allowed to write certain stuff, and what is it that is not being read as well. So all of these little questions started to become more and more important for me. And as this journey became, let's say, more focused, I realized that when I said that, everybody says that they're pursuing English because they love books. I realized that I actually loved books in the sense that I loved books as objects. I loved books as things that were being produced, that were being circulated, that were being read, that were being shared, and that were being hidden or censored and so on. So I think that is where, after 6 or 7 years into this journey, I realized, okay, no, as much as I love reading Indian poetry, I love Amrita Pritam, I love Arun Kolatkar, I love HD, I absolutely love reading Faiz Ahmed Faiz, but I thought that no, I also needed to move beyond the content and see what is framing that content. So I started basically getting fascinated by the processes of reading, by the processes of production, by the processes of circulation, how are books made and who is reading them, where are these books being made available. It's not just the fancy cafes, it's not just the fancy bookshops, it's not just Amazon, but it's also bus stands and train stations and on your streets. So there are different kinds of books being produced for different kinds of people at different prices and different forms. There are paperbacks, hardbacks, pirated books, so on. And I won't bore you with all of this introduction to book history here, but that is precisely what I decided to focus on eventually. So that's my very short story of what I do and why I do. And I'm very excited in general to teach these things to you as to why spaces of reading are important, why people who are engaging with these processes are important. And by people, I not only mean authors and readers, but book producers and booksellers and so many other people that I would like to introduce you to, and then different kinds of books that we read and where we read them. For example, one of the courses I offered last semester was about reading Delhi. I love the city of Delhi for different reasons, and for 13 weeks, I talked about why we should focus on the city, how we should be focusing on the city with films like Ibale U, with texts by Aman Sethi, Sohail Hashmi, Aditya Roy Chaudhary, so on and so forth. And I tried to make students understand how you can also read spaces and so on. So when we welcome you here, we are also welcoming you to these processes of thinking, of not just literary thinking, but also political thinking and social thought and so on and so forth. And I'm very excited for all of you to be able to pursue this. And on that note, thank you for listening to me and joining in for this event. I'll hand over the mic to Dr. Turni Chakrabarti now, my newest colleague.
Hello. I hope everyone can hear me. Great. Hi, so my name is Turni Chakrabarti. My pronouns are she, her, hers. A little bit about my educational history. I got my BA in English from LSR and my MA in English from St. Stephen's. And I just received my PhD from George Washington University in Washington, DC. So I guess for me, I've always known that I wanted to study English literature, even as a kid, probably because growing up in Darjeeling, I had a pretty boring, regular childhood. And I think books sort of gave me the ability to escape the ordinariness of life, And as I grew older and began really focusing on literature as a subject, I realized that through the years, even without me knowing, it had become more than a distraction from, the dull reality of my life. It had become something that helped me understand the world around me. It helped me sort of go, the books became more about giving me a sense of how I live my life rather than just become an escape from reality. I am very interested in the stories we tell each other, the stories we tell about ourselves, and how we shape the world around us with our storytelling, and how, the storytelling of others shape our lives, how we are shaped by the stories we hear. My PhD research in general was mostly focused around the novel. I wrote my dissertation on disruptive widowhood in the late 19th and early 20th century British and Bengali novels. So I focused on how the figure of the widow was disruptive at the level of plot, how the widow disrupted sort of the general romantic courtship plot that is so popular, and also how the widow disrupted sort of heteronormative patriarchal ideas about what it is to be a good woman, and how what I was really interested in was seeing how the novel form can be both morally prescriptive and subversive. Like, it can show us very particular traditional moral codes of how to live life, but even while showing us those results, it can give us these sort of moments of subversion, moments of questioning those very morally prescriptive ideas. So that is what sort of fascinates me about the novel form in general, and how it can be both prescriptive and subversive, and how that really allows us to get a very nuanced idea about women's rights and human rights in general. So I'm joining Jindal from the fall semester. At GW, I have had the opportunity to teach courses on British literature, and the last class I taught was on gender and sexuality in Bollywood cinema, which was a very fun course to teach. And I'm really excited to meet all of you in person. I'm currently reading this great collection of short stories by Ken Liu called The Paper Menagerie. He's an Asian American author who sort of blurs the lines between magical realism and science fiction and sort of very dramatic short stories. So that is something that's been on my mind, and I'm really interested in sharing, all that I'm reading and learning with all of you in the future. So thank you.
Okay, Akshay next, if he's there.
Hello, am I audible? Yeah. Hello.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, I've just had recurring problems with my Zoom. I'll just try to log in from my laptop. I think it's going to work. Just give me a sec, everyone. Sorry for the inconvenience. Right, I think I'm in. Right, fine. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Right. Finally. So yeah, so those minor hiccups, technical hiccups. So yeah, so first of all, I mean, I have met most of you, I have interviewed you all, and I would like to thank my colleagues for their introductions, and Dean Dennis as well for an illuminating exposition on literary criticism. And it's interesting that he mentioned Novalis, who is one of my favorite poets from the German Romantic, from the German Romanticism. I bring this up because my journey with foreign languages, and I don't perceive foreign language teaching or foreign language learning as diverse from philology or from literature. In fact, my entire life has been about learning languages in order to read poetry in a language, which is the highest cultural manifestation, highest linguistic manifestation in any language, right? So many people, when they ask me why learn languages, and I don't consider myself a polyglot because I just speak 5 languages. And I know people who speak much more and many more languages, and they do it with an amazing degree of fluency and proficiency. But yes, in my case, I have always tried to delve into a language in order to access poetry, right? That has been the principal objective. It started with German when I started with German in school, like many kids from Pune. I come from Pune, right? So Pune has a rich and long tradition of foreign language learning, especially German, right? Spanish has just taken off, but German and French had always been popular. I started with German at school, and I was fascinated by the language. And even before that, I always was keen on. I always had a keen interest in English, right? So whatever poems we came across in our Maharashtra State Board syllabus, which was not, well, there's not much to write home about, but I remember there were poems by William Blake and John Donne, right? Particularly John Donne, there's a poem about death, right? So and Daffodils, obviously by William Wordsworth, which really caught my fancy, right? But again, the poem which most sort of stayed with me from that era was "Death the Great Leveler" by John Donne, right? Some of the metaphysic poets. So again, I have not formally studied English literature, but obviously I've had an abiding interest in it. I opted to study German at the undergrad level, so I have a BA in German, right, from Pune University, and there I studied Novalis and got acquainted with the works of the great German Romantic poets, and especially one poet whom I would like to recommend is Georg Trakl, right? I mean, Trakl has been a significant influence for me. One of my poetic referentes poetic, one of my poetic references, right? Right. So I started studying Spanish on a whim. I guess there are two stories to it. One, and I think both are interrelated. One has to do with football. I was a big fan. I am a big fan of the Spanish football team, of the Spanish national team, La Furia Roja, right, as it is called. So I was a big fan of the Spanish football team, and they crashed out in the 2002 World Cup and also 2006 World Cup, and I was really sad about it. My mother used to goad me. My mother used to sort of uh, harass me with questions such as why are you so upset? What do you have to do with Spain, etc., etc. And then I said, well, I will forge a long-lasting bond with Spain. And apart from that, my grandfather was a great reader. I think one of the things which he bequeathed to me was his considerable collection of books, as Dr. Kanup has talked about the importance of material object, right? Books as a material object. So I had these books at home lying around, Penguin parallel texts, right? So we had short stories in German, French, Italian, Russian as well. So I just picked up the Spanish one, and I to this day one of my regrets in life is that I did not treat that book with enough affection, and it just came apart. I read it, but I was very careless about it, and it just came apart, and I feel sad to this day. But then I got the reprint from Amazon, right? So interesting sort of interplay there of intergenerational interplay regarding about the reading process and all. So this is the book which which sort of put me on my path. The Penguins parallel text Spanish. These are the short stories, predominantly by Latin American authors, interestingly, right? And with an introduction by Dr. Jean Franco, one of the most important critics in the Hispanosphere, right? I started reading this book, and interestingly, so I cannot emphasize this enough for you students, especially who have Google at their fingertips and cannot imagine an existence pre-Google. So this was pre-Google, right? So what this meant was that when I got a hold of this book in 2006, right, I did have Google, I did have internet at home, but it just did not occur to me to immediately look up the authors, right? So I dived blindly into the book, and I didn't even know who the first author was whom I ended up reading, and it was none other than Jorge Luis Borges. Jorge Luis Borges, the great Argentine author, one of the most important authors of the 20th century in any language, right? I had no clue who he was. I just started reading Borges without knowing who he was. And the first story in this collection, and I recommend buying this collection for all literature students, right? Because the translations in English are excellent, and the stories read very well in English itself. So even if you're not interested in Spanish, you can enjoy the English ones seamlessly. Also, for the ones who know Spanish, who know smattering of Spanish, parallel texts are the way to go. The parallel versions, Penguin has done a sterling job in bringing them out. I have almost all of the Penguin parallel text versions in French and in German as well. For example, I don't know French enough to read in French directly, but then the parallel texts make sure that I enjoy the poetry of Baudelaire or Mallarmé, right? Mallarmé. So these parallel texts are highly recommended. And the first story was by Borges, Emma Suns, one of his female, I won't say it's feminist recounting, but one of his few female-centric stories, let's put it that way, right? So a brilliant story in itself. And then I read Onetti, Juan Carlos Onetti from Uruguay, and he made a huge impression on me to the extent that I have published a couple of poems in Spain, and I've published them with the pseudonym Ramon Onetti, right? So I took on his name, not that I've published anything significant creatively, but he was a significant influence for me, right? So Juan Carlos Onetti from Uruguay was a huge influence, and I started, and that is what really piqued my interest, and I decided to learn Spanish well enough to read these authors in Spanish directly, right, without the English translation. So that was what was my principal motivation. I also worked as an interpreter and translator along the way. I went to Spain as an interpreter, worked for Volkswagen, etc., in a freelancing capacity. And then when I came to Delhi in 2011, and I've been in Delhi ever since. I joined the MA course in JNU, and since then I've completed my MPhil. I'm pursuing my doctoral research. My research is about poetry, right? Again, what could it be about? So it's a comparative study between a Marathi poet called Narayan Surve and an El Salvadorian revolutionary poet, Roque Dalton. So I'm studying the convergences and the similarities in the in their poetic core, right? So this is a comparative study, and I will be teaching courses on translation, literary theory, as Dennis pointed out, and also an interesting course which I floated last semester as well, was a course introducing Hispanic aesthetics in English, right? So as you have seen, I have a huge collection, personal collection of parallel texts and translations from English, from Spanish into English, and from other languages as well. So this is what is going to be really useful for me to teach first semester or second semester students who might not necessarily have the requisite language skills to navigate a text in Spanish on their own, but then I'll be relying on this vast repertoire of translated texts which I have to introduce my students to Spanish and Hispanic literatures, cultures, and aesthetics as well, right? So I'll also talk about music, about series, which all of you, I'm sure, must have watched, Casa de Papel, which is Money Heist, or Narcos, right? So Narcos, for me, for example, all these series are extremely interesting, especially Narcos is really interesting because there is a medley of accents there, right? So you have accents from Colombia, Mexico, and also Argentina. There's this smattering of Spanish accents as well. So in fact, Narcos was very significant for me because I developed an ear by watching Narcos. It helped me in distinguishing these accents, and it's remarkable how much it helped, right? Because I have been in touch mostly with Spanish natives. I taught for 6 years at Instituto Cervantes, which is the cultural wing of the Spanish embassy, right? So I taught all the levels from A1 to C1 there. And it was an interesting experience because I found out how what sort of difficulties one faces, right, as a student. And I had a different path from most. I was lucky enough to have access to resources and materials, but now I realize that my students are luckier than me because foreign language teaching is advanced rapidly. And at Jindal, at JSLL, we are going to teach in a very communicative and interactive approach, right? Just the way I'm talking and all. It will be very interactive and open-ended, but at the same time, premised on cognitive linguistics, right? So huge term again, like Dennis has already introduced you to some terms. There's another term which is key for as far as Spanish teaching is concerned at JSLL, which is cognitive linguistics, and it's also be interesting for you as students of English literature, right, or English philology, to get in touch with or get familiarized with cognitive linguistics and the way language functions, right? The cognitive mechanisms are at work while acquiring or assimilating a new language. So we'll be teaching Spanish with that approach, which is the latest approach in foreign language teaching. And as students of English literature and philology, I think I would be glad if you took up some courses with me, if you want to learn Spanish. And even then, if you're not particularly keen on learning Spanish as a foreign language, you can always take up the course on aesthetics and literature, which I think would be really interesting because it will give you a window into Hispanic cultures and also enrich your perspectives, right? And that's as Dennis said, we read literature to be eventually to be better human beings, right? And it sounds really idealistic. Doesn't sound very practical, but it actually is very practical because then it has repercussions for your entire life and the way you go about your life, right? So I will not take up much more of your time. Thanks for patiently listening me out, and I will pass the baton on to Dr. Angana Moitra, my colleague from English Studies. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, thanks, Akshay, for that very nice and interactive introduction to your interests. It was good to be acquainted with what your journey, because we are very new colleagues still. And I'm really happy that this opportunity has been provided for this kind of virtual interaction with the potential students that we will be getting at JSLL. So a very warm welcome to everybody. My name is Angana Moitra. I am a medievalist and early modernist by kind of my area of specialization, which is to say that I am pretty much interested in anything and everything that pertains to the history, literature, and culture of the 14th to the 17th centuries in Europe generally, but particularly in the British Isles, particularly in England. A little bit about my educational background. I received my BA in English from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata, and my MA in English from Jadavpur University, also Kolkata. I was enrolled in the MPhil program at Jadavpur for a year, but midway through it, I was selected as part of the Erasmus Mundus TEAM program, TEAM, which is an abbreviation for Text and Event in Early Modern Europe. This was a joint doctoral program which was funded by the European Union, and it was a really wonderful opportunity for me to be a part of a program which was specifically devoted to the very area in which I had been hoping to specialize. So between 2015 to 2020, I was really living the life in Europe. I was in the UK at first, in Canterbury for 6 months. And then I moved to Berlin, Germany, where I lived for 4.5 years. I defended my doctoral thesis in May 2020 and subsequently returned to India. Now, a little bit about why I kind of decided to delve into the Middle Ages. Seems like an unorthodox choice for most. To answer this, I'll just kind of go back to my school days, I suppose. And pretty much as far as I can remember, I've always enjoyed reading. It's one of those very cliched things to say, but really, some of my earliest memories have to do with books. If you know about the Onnoprashan ceremony, the kind of the first rice eating ceremony that happens in most Hindu families. Apparently, I touched a book during my Onnoprashan. So I guess people expected me to be interested in books somehow, and I lived up to expectations, so to speak. I was obsessed with Enid Blyton, with detective stories as a kid. There was this series called The Three Investigators, which I don't know, not many people seem to have read, but I was absolutely crazy about the Three Investigators books. Read all 21 Famous Five books, 5 Find Outers, Secret series, mystery series, you name it. And then, of course, came Harry Potter, which really changed my life at the time when I encountered it. It's difficult to overstate how obsessed I was with Harry Potter. The first thing I did when I went to London, I went to King's Cross. I took the tube, I went to King's Cross, did that extremely cliched thing of standing at platform 9 3/4 with the trolley and getting my photograph clicked. And this is as a full-blown adult of 26 years of age. So yeah, that kind of gives you an insight into how deeply obsessed I was with Harry Potter. So these things shaped my reading habits, were formative for me during my teenage years. There was also, of course, my father. My father was also a student of English honors, and he would always tell us stories. And it's only much later that I realized that he wasn't very creative. He was just retelling us the stories from Shakespeare's plays. So I actually knew a lot of the stories before I actually encountered the texts later in high school. So I had that kind of impelling me as well. So, be a part of this culture of listening to and telling stories and reading stories and finding out kind of how to craft this world of the imagination, so to speak. So this was why I kind of got into English honors fresh out of school. But the more I kind of progressed in the course, the more I realized that I was really, really fascinated by the past. I found it really endlessly interesting to know how people kind of thought, lived, and felt and wrote about their experiences, from times that we are not familiar with. So some of my favorite classes during my BA days were on Shakespeare and his contemporaries and successors. I absolutely fell in love with early modern drama. I fell in love with the historical circumstances which produced such texts. The kind of teaching that I received in Calcutta University at the time sometimes tended to neglect the historical circumstances which led to the production of certain dramatic texts. But when I kind of found out more about this whole context, say, of witchcraft and what kind of a daring thing Shakespeare did in presenting a play such as Macbeth, which was about the regicide or the murder of a Scottish king in front of a Scottish king, and got away with it, it really kind of deepened my appreciation of literature in general. And pretty much as I progressed from the BA onto the MA, I tended to regress further into the past. More and more older things, more and more antiquated things piqued my interest. And to the extent that midway through my MA, I decided that this is it. This is what I would be looking at. I had a wonderful course on Arthurian romance, which I just absolutely loved. And in order to kind of teach myself how to read Middle English, I picked up this book from the departmental library at Jadavpur. It was The Romance of Sir Orfeo, and really there was no looking back once I read that. It's what I based my PhD thesis on. My thesis looked at the representation of fairies, particularly how the figure of the fairy king and his representation changed from the medieval romance to the early modern period. And this is because I saw, as I read these texts, that this kind of Disney conception of fairies that we have, with like little gossamer wings, a star-tipped wand, granting wishes, it was not at all borne out by history. The fairies of the Middle Ages were actually really, really scary creatures, and you would not want to mess with them. And I wanted to find out, well, then how did they change? What accounted for this kind of sea change in representation and in cultural thought, in the cultural imagination of fairies? And that is what I wrote a dissertation on. Generally, my wider kind of aim in deciding to stay on in academia and to go into teaching is essentially to, well, at least make an attempt to transmit some of this interest to students. The Middle Ages is not something that students usually encounter as part of the school syllabus, which is probably understandable. It's a very, in certain respects, it seems very remote, a time so far removed from us that there's possibly no way of bridging this gap. But that's not really true. And I think that is the ethos which informs most of my teaching. So I think the experience of the coronavirus has kind of shown us that we are not all that very different from our predecessors living in the 13th and 14th centuries. You had repeated kind of episodes of epidemics, especially the Black Death, the bubonic plague outbreaks in Europe, which decimated half of the population of Europe. And think about it, with all these centuries of progress in medical science, there's still some things that human beings always try to kind of grapple with: death, mortality. And the people living in the Middle Ages were trying to do the same things as us. Maybe they did not have knowledge of vaccines, but that did not really take away from the fact that they lost their loved ones, they lost their families, they lost their lives. And how did they try to deal with these things, these experiences of life, of death? They too kind of lived and loved and thought and felt and sang and danced, at that time. And that's really, at the risk of sounding very, very kind of excessive, but it's a risk I will take. It's really, to understand the Middle Ages is to understand the human experience in general. It's literature. What is literature? It is part of the collective memorial record of humanity. And if we try to understand that, we can see where we came from and perhaps we can understand where we are going. Even apart from that, if all these things sound too kind of esoteric and vague, the Middle Ages continues to pervade so many kind of things that we encounter in pop culture. Shows like Merlin, definitely Game of Thrones, which I'm sure everybody has seen, very much based on developments in medieval European history. Even think about creatively deconstructing such things as, think about the manga / anime Death Note. You have the gods of death, the Shinigami, which is, in a sense, I looked at the gods of death in the Greco-Roman kind of mythical imagination in my thesis. It's all a part of the human attempt to sort of mythologize death, so to speak. At the risk of sounding contentious, I will talk about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. It's very much like a lot of the witchcraft trials that took place in 16th century Europe, if you actually read about it. I would even go on to say that the thing that we all love, Marvel, the superhero kind of genre, superheroes are sort of like superpowered knights who went on quests in the medieval romances. So there's so much salience to the kinds of literature and literary artifacts that were produced in the Middle Ages. There was so much beauty. You can see it in the works of art. You can see it in the illuminated manuscripts, which are such absolutely breathtaking objects of beauty. You can see it in the cathedrals and the castles that you can find all across Europe. And I think there is just so much joy and sort of kind of chastening, sober realization to be gained from a study of the Middle Ages, which is what I always want to transmit to my students. And as you can see, I clearly have many ideas about this. I can't wait to share it with you within the space of the classroom if you give me the opportunity. So thank you very much. I hope to see you all in person very soon at OP Jindal Global University. Thank you.
All right, thanks to all of you, and I really liked Dr. Angana's spirited attempt to show the relevance of the Middle Ages to the way we live now. I myself am also very convinced of that, and for what it's worth, a course that I'll probably be teaching in the next semester is about an Englishman named William Morris, who was a renowned poet in the mid and late 19th century, but who was also very active in kind of being a kind of applied medievalist and trying to, in a sense, resurrect or revive certain forms of medieval stories and literature, the Eddas, the epic stories of Scandinavian and Germanic cultures in Europe in particular. But without William Morris, I would say no Harry Potter, actually. There's a very direct line of influence between the medievalism that William Morris practiced and these stories that you probably became acquainted with in films like The Lord of the Rings and all of those. In other words, no J.R.R. Tolkien and no Lord of the Rings, no C.S. Lewis. I would say even a lot of the current kind of Marvel, DC Comics, epics of heroes really would have happened or wouldn't have happened the way they have without someone like Morris as a medievalist in the 19th century. But anyway, we now want to spend some time talking about specifics of the program or the program structure. I'm going to skip over learning objectives and overview. But before I get to that, several things that my colleagues have said about their own work and their own interests take me back to something I said in my introduction about the relationship between criticism and creative activity. Okay, several of my colleagues here themselves are poets and are writers. The writing they do is not only critical or analytical writing, but in some cases, I won't embarrass people by naming names, but some of you are poets. You've published works of poetry, and also several of you are translators, okay? And there are many schools or theories of translation studies which describe translation as a kind of second creative act or recreation. So several of my colleagues here themselves do translation between, say, English and Punjabi or Hindi, or from Punjabi to English or Hindi to English, Spanish to English, Spanish to Marathi, Marathi to Spanish. Okay, so I think this just goes to show that the academic scholars' academic work can be very easily combined with creative work of different kinds, including actually writing poetry and prose that normal people can enjoy. Okay, so forgive me for giving you that little lesson, but I think it's worth repeating that I agree with people like Matthew Arnold and T.S. Eliot that the best critics are often the best poets, and the best poets are often the best critics, and also translators often have very important insights into poetry as creative, poetry and prose as creative work, simply in the act of doing translation, trying to take something from language and give at least an approximately similar impact or effect for someone reading that translated work, something from Hindi to English or whatever. Okay, so it's all part of the same thing. It's all good. All right, I want to get into some specifics about the program itself and the program structure, not by giving descriptions of particular courses, but rather talking about the kinds of courses and kinds of activities that you will be doing in this program. Maybe I'll say some things, and if I left something important out, perhaps Dr. Kanupriya or Akshay can point out what I missed. Okay, so first of all, this undergraduate program is like other undergraduate programs of O.P. Jindal Global University in that the total number of credits is between 140 and 150. I would like to be able to tell you exactly how many credits you will have to complete in order to get your degree, BA Honors English, but I cannot do that right now. I'll be honest about that because we're actually working out some of these details in accordance with university regulations, but most of the undergraduate programs of this university require completion of between 140 and 150 credits. Okay, a credit is a way of measuring not so much effort as time or hours of direct instruction. So you will discover that there are courses that are given 6 credits or 4 credits or even 3 credits or 2 credits. And that measure of credits is supposed to reflect approximately the number of classroom hours or hours of direct instruction per week, okay? Which is to say that a course that is of 4 credits should involve about about 4, 5, or 6 hours of direct instruction, perhaps in the form of lecturing or maybe discussions or even what we call tutorials. And obviously a 6 credit course is going to be heavier than a 4 credit course or a 3 credit course. So that total number of credits may seem very abstract, but I will say approximately 140 credits that you will be completing over 6 semesters. And those credited and graded courses fall into different categories. Okay, the thing that I have to say the least about probably is the core or the compulsory courses, which is to say the courses that are compulsory for all students of the program, courses that they have to complete in order to complete the program. So the slide here shows some of the proposed compulsory courses: 19th century British novel, what is Indian literature in quotation marks, literary modernism, modern Indian English poetry, a course on Shakespeare yesterday and today. These are all proposed core or compulsory courses. That's not a comprehensive list of them. You will be doing probably 13, either 13 or 14 or 15 compulsory courses over your 6 semesters, okay? And those are the courses that all of you will do, that all students of this program will do. There are also courses that we describe as program electives, which is to say courses that you may choose from that are not all absolutely required for all students of the program, but all students of the program have to complete a certain number of credits of courses in that category of program electives, okay? So the program electives are courses that are taught within the school, which is to say by the faculty who are present here today and other faculty who will be joining. That's why they're called program electives. They usually have more specific content than a core course, or they're intended to introduce students to a particular interpretive technique or analytical perspective. They're not necessarily more specific than the core courses. Sometimes they may deal with what we call a genre, okay, say poetry or drama or something, a genre of literature, or they may deal with artistic production over a particular time period, not necessarily a narrow one, might be a fairly narrow one, such as the European Middle Ages, or it might be a course which focuses on a genre, or as I said, may focus on a critique. So the one that you see on the slide in the top panel there, short stories from across the world. In other words, short stories is a form of literature in English and other languages, and to kind of globalize it or pack it into something that's called world literature. A program elective on short stories from around the world is going to be introducing you to the short story as a form or as a genre, not only in English, but will also probably be acquainting you with short stories originally written in other languages, but then translated. The course with the proposed course with the title Close Reading, Uses and Methods. Okay, so a lot of literary scholars will go on about close reading and the importance of the skills of close reading. And you might wonder, well, what the heck is close reading? How is it different from just reading? Okay, well, that's what this course will focus on. And certainly other courses will certainly encourage in you habits of close reading, but this is a program elective course that will really get really up close and personal about techniques of close reading uses and methods. Okay, literature of cities again is something which has a particular theme, and that will be offered as a program elective. At this point, we're pretty sure that our program electives will count for 4 credits, whereas the core or compulsory courses will count for 6 credits. Now, the importance of that distinction is that it's not that we necessarily believe that the core compulsory courses are more important than the program electives, but they're intended to teach particular common content or particular skills that all students of the program will need or benefit from, and they will involve more hours, more time of direct instruction. And a lot of these courses will actually be divided into 4 credits plus 2 credits. In other words, the course might actually appear on your transcript in 2 parts. It will give the theory part and what might be called the practical part or the tutorial, but that compulsory or core course each of those is going to count for 4 credits, which is to say approximately 6, 7, or perhaps even 8 hours of direct instruction per week over a semester of 15 or 16 weeks. The program electives are a little bit lighter, and they are, again, things that you may choose from. We'll try to make sure that regardless of the requirements of the particular program semester, that there are a couple of program electives for you to choose from. Some of you may be doing one course or set of courses, and others may be doing other courses. That's fine. That's why they're called electives. Okay. We also have what are called cross-listed electives, and cross-listed electives refers to courses that are offered across various schools of the university. In other words, a cross-elective might be a course that's taught in the Jindal Global Law School or the Jindal School of International Affairs, but is open, as we say, to students of other programs. Okay, so this is a course that will give you the opportunity, in a sense, to step out of your school JSLL to have a learning experience with faculty members of other schools. And we think is important. This is important for various reasons, not only because we think that you should do courses, say, in fine arts or performing arts, or even in history or political science or international relations, but we also recognize that a lot of our colleagues in this university who are involved in language and literature studies are actually in schools other than JSLL. By my reckoning, there are at least 50, actually closer to 60 faculty members of more than 800 faculty members of the university who are engaged in one way or another in language and literature studies. They may teach German language and literature. They may teach mass communications. They may teach print journalism. In other words, the writing techniques that one uses as a print journalist. Okay, there are scholars of comparative literature and world literature who may be teaching you about, say, Urdu, literature written in Urdu, and perhaps you'll actually be studying it in English rather than in Urdu, or encountering literature in Punjabi or Bengali, or Tamil or other Indian languages or non-Indian languages. Okay, so there's a world of cross electives taught by faculty who are actually parts of other units of the university. So you've got your core compulsory courses, you've got your program electives taught by faculty, usually taught by faculty within the school, and then what we call the cross electives, and there will be a certain number of credits, or rather a range of credits that you will need to complete in each of those three areas. Okay, we've been very hesitant to give you a very specific calendar or breakdown of the courses and credits of each semester. It's not possible for us to do that yet, but I can tell you that in each semester you will be completing between 24 and about between 20 and 26 credits. Okay, in most semesters of the program you'll be doing something like 23 or 24 or 25 credits. A mixture of compulsory courses and elective courses. And as you go through the program, there will be more electivity, which is to say that in semesters 1 and 2, most of the credits that you'll complete will be compulsory courses. And then as you go on to semesters 3, 4, 5, and 6, you will be required to do fewer compulsory courses and encouraged to do more program elective courses and what we call cross electives, but it works out to about 24 to 25 credits per semester across 6 semesters. Okay. We also have in the university what's called an internship requirement. Now, this is a little bit infuriating for me as an administrator because there's some uncertainty at this moment as to how many credits of internships students must undergo in each program of the university and what the credit weightage will be for those courses. But I can tell you that there will be internships which you will actually be doing or undertaking usually between semesters, okay, in what we call the intersession periods between, say, the fall semester, the end of the fall semester and the beginning of the spring semester, which is, say, between the middle of December and the very beginning of February. That will be one internship period. And the second internship period will be during the longer summer vacations from about the 15th of June to the 1st of August. So those are intersessional periods in which you will do internships. Not every intersessional period will be occupied by an internship, but many of them will be. I apologize for not being able to give you specific numbers at this point, but you will be completing something like between 6 and 10 credits of internships over the 6 semester program. I don't want to talk in detail. I don't want to really talk at all about what is meant by internship, except to point out that in many programs of this university, internships are basically immersion experiences where students get to learn about particular kinds of work or particular jobs. Okay, so students in the programs in, say, journalism and communications or law or banking and finance are often, as we say, placed with organizations for an internship, which is to say they work with people in a particular professional setting to learn something about that work or even to learn about particular jobs. So you in this program may be able to have internships of that kind also. In other words, your internship might involve working with a publisher or a press or a newspaper or a media house, where you would be working then with professionals or practitioners in those areas to see what it is they do. You will be supervised by professionals. And then when you successfully do what they expect you to do, you will be given a certificate which shows that you have completed the internship. That's one kind of internship. You might also be able to do something like a Coursera course. In other words, another academic exercise, but not a course which is taught by faculty of this university, but rather by faculty of another university. And since Coursera is a world-renowned, reputable kind of online learning platform, since Coursera courses are usually carefully organized and require that students complete particular tasks and even get grades for completion of those tasks, your completion certificate of a Coursera course or something like it would then count as completion of an internship. Okay. Another kind of internship that you might be able to do is what we call a study abroad opportunity. Okay. That's a little bit complicated because there will be study abroad opportunities for you of different kinds. You may be able to do a full semester's engagement at Queen Mary of the University of London, or University of Western Australia, or Rutgers University, or the Sorbonne. You will be able to spend a full semester enrolled as a student at that institution, and the credits and grades that you earn during that semester will then be carried back with you back to Jindal University and count towards completion of your degree. Okay. Okay. Now I'm mentioning that because there are different kinds of study abroad opportunities other than full semester study abroad opportunities. There are half semester or multi-week study abroad engagements, which usually happen during the intersessions. Okay, so I happen to know that a lot of learners of Spanish in the university are now at the University of Granada in Spain with a faculty member of JGU for a period of 4 or 5 weeks. And that will be, they will receive credits and kind of completion certificates for having done that. But that will basically satisfy an internship requirement of those students' programs. So pardon me, I'm probably making it a little bit confusing. I'm simply saying that there are study abroad opportunities of various kinds, and some study abroad opportunities can be counted as internships. Okay, so already I've mentioned 3 kinds of internships: the kind of pre-professional immersion, the opportunity to do a course in a formal course in an area that is perhaps not covered by this university or taught by some eminent person in a university other than JGU. So Coursera or other online course could satisfy the internship requirement, and certain kinds of study abroad engagements could also satisfy your internship requirement. Okay. Internships will also be given what are called non-academic credits, which is to say that whatever number of credits that you earn for satisfying that internship requirement, whether it's 4 credits or 6 credits, will not be counted towards your program grade average. In other words, you'll be given a grade which is basically pass-fail. You know, you completed it or you didn't, and it will be mentioned on your transcript as completing degree requirements, but it will not, because you're not given a grade like outstanding or A+ or minus. Those credits will not actually be figured or calculated in your overall program grade average, but they are still requirements of the program. You may have some questions about that. Seems kind of confusing, and to be honest, it's kind of confusing for me too, because we're still kind of working out the parameters or the conditions for internships in this particular program, but you will have the opportunity to do internships, and those will be requirements of your program. In the next couple of weeks, or certainly month, we will be able to give you more specific information about that. One other kind of activity that I want to talk about here is what we're tentatively calling the portfolio course, which is something that you will do in your final program semester as a kind of presentation or summary of work that you have done over the 6 semesters of your program. Okay, the portfolio course is probably, in most cases, it's going to be a one-on-one academic activity in which you are put under the supervision of a particular faculty member, and you will work on a written document, which is a kind of self-reflection note about work that you've done over the course of the program. And second, you will give an oral presentation about the work you've done throughout the program to other students, that is, fellow students of the program. So the portfolio is literally a kind of tour for others of what it is that you've learned across 6 semesters. It's a very common learning technique in schools of design and architecture, where people are designing buildings or making sculptures and so on, and it's agreed among teachers in those areas that it's useful for students to be able to review the work they've done over a particular period of time, and to be able to present or describe that work to others. So it's a kind of activity that started kind of in arts and architecture education, but it's been used in other kinds of programs also. You will be completing a portfolio course for 4 credits in your 6th semester, and will be given a grade for that. And again, basically, it's an opportunity for you to engage in a kind of guided self-appraisal of your learning accomplishments over a period of 6 semesters. Okay, it doesn't count as much, or will probably not count as much as one of your core or compulsory courses, but it's equivalent to one of those elective courses, and it is required for completion of the program. There are certainly other things, although we lack some specific information about requirements. There are other things we could tell you about this, but it's probably better, rather than giving you information which or specific information about program requirements which is not yet formalized or officially approved. It's best that we leave that for another time, just before you join us in the month of August. So we will have other ways of orienting you towards the specific requirements of your program, and this was just to give an overview. If other faculty members would like to say something about something important that I may have missed, you're welcome to do so before we go on to question and answers. Okay, so again, we intentionally avoided giving you a kind of chart which shows a semester to semester breakup of number of credits and specific courses. We're still working on that. Our objective here was really to describe the different kinds of program requirements, the different components of the course, including the internships.
The students are now allowed to talk, or you may want to type your questions.
Yeah, I was just going to ask whether maybe you, Kanopri, or someone else would like to add anything about program requirements or program overview that I didn't mention just now.
I feel that from my end, I feel that we've covered most of what we wanted to share.
Okay.
I would rather wait for questions then and see if we've missed anything. I think we already have something.
Okay. So someone has asked here in the chat box, is there a set amount of elective and cross-elective programs required per semester? It's not uniform, okay? It's not regular every semester. The balance between core or compulsory courses and the different electives will change. As I said before, in semesters 1 and 2, probably as much as 18 credits that you do in semesters 1 and 2 will be core or compulsory courses. In other words, no choice or little choice, and fewer electives. But as you move on to semesters 3, 4, 5, and 6, there'll be a heavier component of electives. Okay, but again, the important thing to pay attention to here is that the core compulsory courses will be 6 credits each, and the electives will be 4 credits. In some cases, there may be 3 because in some schools at the university, they follow the practice of 3 credits for cross electives. And since that's the way they do it in those schools, if you're taking a cross elective offered by the Jindal School of International Affairs or Public Policy or whatever, you'll be given the number of credits determined by that program. But compulsory courses, 6 credits, electives usually 3 or 4 credits. And the balance between compulsory and elective courses will change from semester to semester. As I said, the average will be 24 to 25 credits per semester, but there's some semesters where you will have more credits to complete than others. Okay, Tanisha Kaur is asking, is it possible to, just looking at the chat here, is it possible to carry forth an elective or cross-elective for 2 semesters instead of 1? Not really sure what that means, actually. The cross electives, as was, I think, pointed out in one of the slides, in any given semester, there are actually about 300 cross elective courses offered throughout the university. And they're changing. Every year they change, okay? So one course that you may look at the roster of courses that are available in a given semester in the whole university and say, oh, I'd really like to do that, but maybe something doesn't work out with your schedule, or you're required to do compulsory courses, and you just don't have the opportunity to do that cross elective at that particular time. Don't worry, okay? The same cross elective course is likely to be offered, if not in the next semester, then in 2 semesters after that. So you will have an opportunity to do that elective then. And also the kind of the repertoire of cross-elective courses is always changing depending on the interests of faculty members, which actually means that some courses that are offered in 1 semester might not be available the next semester or even semester after that. But I would say probably half of the courses are repeated from, half of the cross-elective courses roughly are repeated from 1 academic year to the next.
Right.
Okay.
If I may,
Yeah, go ahead.
may I interject, Dennis? Yeah, I think what she means is right. So this would be, for example, the case if you opt for, say, French or German, which will be offered, let's say, as an example, from the Global Language Center, right? So then you might have the possibility of, let's say, doing French 1 and French 2, right? So the language courses, there is a possibility. I mean, we just cannot say anything concretely, but there is a possibility. The language, if you pick up a language course, it might be carried forward from 1 course to the next, right? The other electives, I don't think. I mean, depends on the particular course in question, but I don't think that this you will have, let's say, literary theory 1 and literary theory 2 as cross electives, right? So I don't think that would be the case, but this might be the case vis-a-vis the language courses. If you opt for any language course as a cross elective, as a program elective, I think it will be a program elective then.
Yeah, and as far as language courses in particular are concerned, the basic language learning courses like Spanish 1, French 2, German 3 are offered in nearly every semester of the university. Okay, so you might decide to take up Spanish or German, maybe not in your semester 3, but in your semester 4, you want to take the beginning course. If you're not able to do it in semester 3, it's probably the same courses offered in some form in semester 4 also.
Right. The only limitation here would be, for example, if you decide in semester 3 to take up Spanish 1. So obviously, I mean, in semester 4 you can't take up Spanish 2 if you haven't taken up Spanish 1 before, right? I mean, that's just obvious. So you'll have to start from you'll have to follow the program structure which has been laid out, right? So you just can't take up. Let's say you cannot start Spanish 2 without having done Spanish 1.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the only invitation there.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so Shania is asking, the Coursera course will happen at the same time as our normal semester courses or during a set amount of time for internships allowed. Okay, I might not have been clear about that. What I'm suggesting is that since, first of all, nothing prevents you from doing a Coursera course on your own time, regardless of whether the university recognizes it as completing a requirement of this university. Okay, that's something you can do for fun on your own. What I was trying to say is that one way of satisfying an internship requirement might be to do a Coursera course. And it'll probably be more manageable for you if you do that Coursera course during one of the intersessions rather than on top of the 20 or 24 credits of prescribed courses that you're doing for this program. Coursera courses, for example, I'm not a brand spokesperson for Coursera. It's just the learning platform that I'm familiar with. There are, of course, other learning companies that do this, but since they're offered year-round and since they're often done both synchronously and asynchronously, and the lectures or the course activities are usually recorded and are available for you to access any time or day of night. You can actually do the Coursera course, on your own time, but it may be more convenient for you to do that during one of the intersession periods when you're not doing one of the prescribed courses of this program. That's what I was trying to say, if that makes sense. In fact, I would discourage you from trying to do a Coursera course in order to satisfy an internship requirement during the normal teaching period. It may be possible, but we'll advise you about that. Let's put it that way. Also, Coursera courses that would satisfy an internship requirement are going to be graded on a pass-fail basis, which, to put it kind of cynically, you don't necessarily have to do as much work. You have to do enough work to pass the course. Whether you pass it with flying colors or just barely pass it, it won't make any difference once you get your certificate, and it will count for completion of an internship requirement. You may have time to do that during the regular teaching periods of the fall and spring semesters, or you might find it convenient to do that during the intersessions. We'll give you more information about this later. The slides that you were shown earlier, which gave samples or examples of program elective, core courses, program electives, and cross electives, were just indicative lists. As I said, there are always more than 200 cross elective courses available in any semester at this university. I think that there are presently 12 schools of the university. Each of them offers something, some of the larger schools offer as many as 50 cross-elective courses in a semester. Some of the smaller schools might offer only 6 or 10, but if you count them all up, in other words, it's very easy to satisfy the cross-elective course requirement because there simply are so many courses available in that category in any semester. Program electives will be a little bit different. We'll try to at least offer a couple of them in every program the semester. Every semester of the program, we might have as many as, if not this year, then in the 2023-24 academic year, we might be able to offer as many as 5 or 6 or even 7 program electives per semester. But those of you newbies, those of you who are starting this program in its infancy will probably have fewer. One of the problems is that you'll have fewer program electives to choose from than students in subsequent batches, but we'll try to make sure that you have some actual choice in any given semester among program electives. Any extracurricular activities such as sports? Bilkul, lots of extracurricular activities, sports, music clubs. There's an English Literary Society whose faculty advisor is a professor of English named Professor Jagdish Batra. He's not a faculty member of JSLL, but he's an at-large professor of English in the university. He's currently the faculty supervisor of the English Literary Society. There's several other student clubs, debating societies, and so on. So not only sports, but other extracurricular activities are certainly there. I'm not the person to give you specific information about that, but as I said, you will be having a general student orientation right at the beginning, just before the fall semester begins, when they will tell you about those sorts of things. Also, you can go to the university website and you'll find information there about extracurricular activities, including sports. We have not yet taken the step of, that is, as a school, taken a step of forming our own JSLL Literary Society. We might decide to do that, but since we have a perfectly good, useful, all-university literary society, that's something that you might find interesting and rewarding. There's information about that on the website. English Literary Society, which simply means not necessarily English literature, but literature approached through the English language. There will also, of course, be festivals, including festivals of language and literature. Okay, so there's at least one Spanish day. I know there's a German day and a French day also. Okay, probably, and this school, I think, will be taking the lead in organizing more activities of that kind, whether they are, once a year festivals of 2 or 3 days or a whole week, or whether they're kind of serial events that occur over a semester or a year. Akshay mentioned that there's a unit of the university called the Global Languages Center. Okay, so although Akshay teaches Spanish, language and literature, and is teaching those courses within this school, he also teaches those courses within the Global Languages Center. And then there's a separate group of faculty which offers instruction in Spanish, German, French, sometimes Arabic, sometimes Farsi, and sometimes Chinese also. That's the faculty of the Global Languages Center, and those are courses available to any student of any program at the university. There's also a Center for Writing Studies, which Dr. Kanupriya Dhingra has been involved with, which is kind of a go-to unit for kind of perfecting your skills and abilities in, say, analytical writing or expository writing. or thesis writing, so that even though we may, as the faculty of JSLL, may offer courses in, say, expository writing, the Center for Writing Studies is a center that regularly teaches courses of that kind. So you may satisfy one of your cross-elective requirements, or cross-elective course requirements, by doing a course through the Center for Writing Studies. And actually, you can get guidance from those people without doing a course at all, right? It's as I said, kind of a study skills or services center that any students can go to for assistance in particular things.
And if I may add, there's an open house that we are conducting on the 18th for those of you who want to visit the campus and meet any of us as well, to get a sense of how things work here, what the campus looks like, and so on. So that's on the 18th. You may contact Ms. Shalini for that.
Yes, so the 18th, I believe it begins at 10:30 or 11 in the morning on Saturday. For us, it's 11, but I think maybe the students are gathering, have some kind of welcome
I'll just check.
activities at 10:30. Anyway, as Dr. Dhingra managed, you can contact Vishalini Saini, who's our admissions officer, for information about that.
It starts at 11 a.m. and you may visit according to your timings, and you'll have to inform Shalini, and there's a form that you need to fill for that.
Okay, and it is a real-time event. It's actually on the campus of the university in open house.
I don't think there are any more questions.
All right, well, we don't necessarily have to run out the clock here, but 10 minutes left. So if anyone has something they'd like to ask, we'll try to answer your questions. Again, we are going to be giving you more specific information about the program structure, number of credits per semester, number of credits to complete in the different categories and so on at a later time, before you join in August. The bad news in a way is that in semesters 1 and 2, most of your courses will be core or compulsory. So you won't have that much choice in the first year, at least in terms of your formal accredited graded courses. But you will experience more electivity in the second and third years. Overall, the component of compulsory courses will be roughly half, between 50 and 60% of your degree credits will be core and compulsory courses, and the rest will be the internships and the elective courses. And again, that's typical of undergraduate programs at the university. Anything else you'd like to ask about the program or the about us? All right, well, students will be taking admission to this program in the months of June and July, and perhaps even of August. So it's possible that we'll have another, immersion session, pre-semester session like this sometime later this summer before you actually join. And I think at that point, we should be able to give you more solid information about, credits and courses and that sort of thing. We will, for instance, have finalized the core courses and the elective courses that will be on offer in the fall semester 2022. If you do have questions, if something occurs to you later, you can always contact Ms. Shalini Saini, who you've been in contact with as the admissions officer for JSLL. You can also contact our school administrative assistant. Her name is Neha Rana. So it's just write her, type a message here, her email address. Okay. Ms. Neha Rana. Give you my email address here as well. Probably should have given her email IDs on the slides, but for what it's worth, it's my email address if you have any questions later.
For any specific query, Shalini would be able to put you in touch with us as well. So
yeah, particularly things about, payment of fees and refund of fees and that sort of thing, and when you do what, when, that sort of thing.
no, I meant that if they have any questions for us, they also can approach via Shalini and the questions.
Right, yeah. All right, well, thank you, students, for making time for this activity. Although we didn't give as much specific information as we could have, we wanted to give you an overview of the program so you have at least some sense of what you'll be facing from August of this year. Good luck finishing up your secondary school exams and so on. I realized there was a CBSE exam even today in psychology. That's why some students were unable to attend today. But they will be oriented also, those students. And thank you. I thank my colleagues at Kanupriya, Akshay, Angana, Tony for being present for this. And it was kind of fun, I thought.
Thanks, Dennis.
It
All
was.
right.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, and we'll be in touch.
Good afternoon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. See you later. Bye.